Hello, dear listeners. Close your eyes now. Let the darkness around you soften. This story is for sleep, a narrative to carry you into the quiet hours. But the quiet you hear is a lie. Because tonight, we are stepping into a silence so profound it swallowed an entire family whole. We are walking into the Oklahoma woods, where the trees hold secrets in their bark and the ground keeps its promises only for the dead. This is the story of the Jameson family. A case where every answer is a question, every clue a taunt, and the truth is a ghost that flickers just beyond the reach of the flashlight's beam. Listen, and let the mystery pull you under. Picture a house on a quiet, dusty road in Red Oak, Oklahoma. It's October 2009. The sky is a vast, pale blue, and the leaves are just beginning to think about turning. The house belongs to Bobby and Sherilyn Jameson and their 6-year-old daughter, Madison. They are a family caught in the mundane gears of life. Financial stress, familial discord, the slow wear of rural dreams. They are preparing to finalize the purchase of a new piece of land, 40 acres of secluded freedom. On the morning of October 8th, they load their blue Ford pickup truck. Neighbors see them. They are going to meet a real estate agent. A short drive into the mountains. It is the last time anyone will see them alive for over 4 years. They vanished not into the dead of night, but in the clear, hard light of an autumn day. The truck is found days later, parked on the side of a rugged, remote forestry road in the Sans Bois Mountains. The keys are in the ignition. The family dog, a loyal pit bull named Mate, is inside, alive but dehydrated and frantic. Their wallets, IDs, Sherilyn's purse, and a cache of guns are all neatly stacked on the seat. Over $32,000 in cash, meant for the land purchase, sits in a bank bag, untouched. But Bobby, Sherilyn, and little Madison are gone. The door is left open, both literally and metaphorically. It is a tableau that defies every logical sequence of crime. A kidnapping? They left the money. A robbery? They left the guns and the cash. A voluntary disappearance? They left their beloved dog to die. This is a forensic paradox that cracks the case open from the very first moment. An absence so carefully staged it feels like a message, but one written in a language no investigator can decipher. The scene is not chaotic. It is curated. It whispers a decision made or a force encountered that halted their lives in a single, suspended moment. The Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation would arrive, their boots crunching on the gravel, their eyes scanning the silent pines. They would find no struggle, no blood, no note, just an unbearable, echoing quiet. A family had stepped out of their truck and into the thin mountain air, leaving behind every single thing that supposedly matters in this world. The question isn't just where they went. The question is, what did they see or what did they become in that final instant that made all of those things, cash, keys, comfort, utterly irrelevant? The investigator's first assumption, the anchor of Occam's razor, is that they wandered off, got lost, succumbed to the elements. But the profile of the scene rejects it. Bobby Jameson was a seasoned outdoorsman. Sherilyn was pragmatic. They were yards from their vehicle, not miles into a hike. The weather was mild, and people lost in the wilderness do not neatly organize their valuables and abandon their pet. This was something else. This was a rupture. As the search parties fanned out, a profound unease settled over the case. It was the unease of a narrative void. Most crimes scream, this one whispered. The evidence left behind wasn't clues. It was philosophical questions made manifest. By the end of that first week, with hundreds of man-hours yielding nothing but more empty forest, the case began its slow, inexorable slide into the cold. But the cold in this case wasn't an absence of heat. It was the presence of a chilling, intelligent ambiguity. The family had become phantoms, and their truck was a tombstone for a mystery. The cliffhanger wasn't a piece of evidence. It was a dawning realization that the entire foundation of investigative logic was wobbling. If this wasn't an accident, and it wasn't conventional crime, then what terrifying third category did it belong to? The woods held the answer. But the woods, as you will learn, are the greatest witnesses and the most silent accomplices on Earth. And as the search was called off, the first snow of the season began to fall, covering any trace, any track, any last hope. It sealed the mountain in a perfect, white silence. A silence you can hear right now, if you listen closely in the dark. The search for the Jamisons was a massive, heart-wrenching operation that quickly turned from hope to grim determination. For days, helicopters beat the air above the Sans Bois Mountains. Search and rescue teams, volunteers, and bloodhounds scoured the dense, rocky terrain. They found nothing. Not a scrap of clothing, not a candy wrapper, not a footprint. The family had evaporated. The discovery of their truck became not a starting point, but a confounding dead end. The cash, the guns, the dog. These were anchors tying the investigation to the spot. But they were anchors in quicksand. Theories bloomed and wilted. A murder-suicide? No bodies. A drug deal gone bad? Bobby had past associations. But nothing current or significant enough to explain the sterile, cash-left-behind scenario. A random abduction by a serial killer? The organized, nonviolent scene didn't fit. The mountain offered no answers. Only more questions whisper on the wind. The case went officially cold, but it never went quiet. In a community like Red Oak, a vanishing of this magnitude becomes a permanent stain on the landscape. Every rustle in the woods, every odd report, would for years be filtered through the lens of that empty blue truck. Then, in 2013, for years and 7 months after they disappeared, the mountain finally gave up its secret. 2 hunters, traversing a remote, heavily wooded slope just a few miles from where the truck was found, stumbled upon a sight that would shatter the long silence. 3 skeletons, lying close together in a natural depression. The remains were scattered, skeletal, almost entirely reclaimed by the forest floor. They were so close to where the truck had been abandoned that search teams had literally walked over them time and again. This is a hauntingly common anomaly in wilderness disappearances. The flyby anomaly, where searchers, constrained by terrain, visibility, and the sheer statistical improbability, miss what is right beneath their feet. The bodies were identified through dental records. It was the Jamisons. The discovery answered the primal question. They were dead. But in doing so, it unleashed a torrent of new, more complex mysteries. The cliffhanger of their location was resolved, only to be replaced by the far more terrifying cliffhanger of their condition. How did they die? And why were they left here, in this shallow, anonymous grave, for the mountain to slowly erase? The skeletal remains were transported to the medical examiner's office, where forensic anthropologists began the painstaking work of reading the story in the bones. This is where cold, hard science was supposed to cut through the murk of speculation. It did not. The results were and remain inconclusive to the point of profound frustration. There was no evidence of blunt force trauma to the skulls. No bullet fragments lodged in bone. No knife marks on the ribs. The bones showed no definitive signs of a violent physical attack. Cause of death, undetermined. Manner of death, undetermined. It was as if death itself had come for them in an invisible, non-corporeal form. But forensics did offer a few tantalizing, brutal clues. First, the positioning. The skeletons of Bobby and Sherilyn were found lying close together. Madison's small remains were found slightly apart, farther up the hill. This spatial arrangement sparked immediate, horrifying theories. Did the parents die together, side by side, while Madison, terrified, tried to run? Or was it a more mundane result of animal scavenging and weather? Secondly, and most chillingly, a single crucial piece of evidence was found near Sherilyn's remains. A .22 caliber pistol. It was a gun that belonged to the Jamisons, one of the many from their collection. It was found near her, not in her hand. Its significance as ambiguous as everything else. Had it been used? If so, on whom? Tests were inconclusive. The gun could have been a murder weapon, a discarded tool, or simply an item they carried with them that fell as they fell. The lack of ballistic or traumatic evidence does not rule out gunshots, especially with a small caliber round to the torso. Soft tissue tells that story, and after 4 years in the Oklahoma elements, soft tissue is gone. So the gun sits in the evidence locker, a silent metal question mark. The forensic analysis created a maddening paradox. The scene at the truck suggested a sudden, decisive event, an interruption. The bones suggested an end that left no classic markers of homicide. This gap is where the true darkness of the case pools. It allows for every theory to breathe. Did they, in a shared paranoid breakdown, agree to a suicide pact? It would explain the lack of defensive wounds and the presence of their own gun. But would they include their 6-year-old daughter? The very thought is a psychological abyss. Or did someone they know, someone they trusted, lead them up that hill and use that small caliber weapon point blank, leaving no struggle? The cliffhanger left by the forensic report is the most fundamental one of all. We have the victims, but we do not have a crime. We have an ending without a verb. Was it murder? Suicide? An accident precipitated by madness? The bones refuse to say. And in that refusal, they grant a terrifying permission for the human mind to imagine the worst possible scenarios. Your mind is doing it right now, in the quiet. That's where the story truly lives, not in the evidence, but in the terrifying freedom of its absence. With physical evidence offering a void, the investigation turns sharply inward into the psychological landscape of the Jamisons in their final days. Sherilyn's journals and computer searches painted a picture of a woman under severe psychological and spiritual distress. Her writing spoke of demonic oppression, of a dark force in their home, of being spiritually attacked. She believed the land they were buying was a portal, a haunted place. She researched local cults and satanic activity. To a strictly empirical investigation, this is fringe noise. To a behavioral profile, it is critical data. Was Sherilyn Jameson experiencing a psychotic break? Was Bobby, under immense stress and perhaps influenced by her, succumbing to a shared psychotic disorder known as folie à deux? This is a rare but documented phenomenon where delusions are transferred from one individual to another in a close relationship. It would explain the vacant, haunted look in the final photos. It would explain why they might suddenly abandon their truck and walk into the woods. They were fleeing an unseen, internal terror they believed was pursuing them. In this theory, the gun was for protection against demons. Their death in the woods could have been a culmination of that psychosis, a mutual suicide, a tragic accident, or exposure after becoming hopelessly disoriented. But what if the monsters were real? Concurrently, investigators explored the cult theory. The Sans Bois Mountains have long been rumored to host isolated groups practicing unconventional beliefs. Was the Jameson family lured to the mountains under the pretense of the land deal, only to be intercepted by a dangerous group? Did they stumble upon something they shouldn't have seen? This theory is fueled by eerie, unconfirmed reports from locals of strange lights and rituals in those woods. It's a theory that connects Sherilyn's fears to a potential external threat. Yet, it lacks any tangible evidence. No cult has ever been identified. No witnesses have come forward. It remains a spectral possibility, a ghost story woven into the factual tapestry. The cliffhanger here lives in the synapse between brain chemistry and evil, which is more terrifying. That a family can be dismantled from the inside by the sheer chemistry of fear, walking willingly to their deaths in a shared delusion, or that there are indeed shadows in the woods that watch and wait, and occasionally reach out to silence the curious. The investigation now stood at a fork in a dark road. One path led into the labyrinth of the human mind. The other led into the even darker woods of human predation. Both paths were shrouded in an impenetrable mist. If the threat wasn't internal or supernatural, then it was likely personal. And nothing was more personal than the venomous feud between Sherilyn Jameson and her mother, Connie. The animosity was legendary, a slow poison that had infected the household. Just days before the disappearance, Bobby and Sherilyn had taken the drastic step of filing a police report against Connie, accusing her of stealing a Social Security check and making violent threats. Connie, for her part, accused Bobby of abuse and Sherilyn of drug use. It was a textbook motive-rich environment. In the immediate aftermath of the disappearance, Connie's behavior raised eyebrows. She quickly moved into the Jameson home. She gave conflicting statements to the media. She seemed, to some, inappropriately detached or even calculating. For a time, she was the investigation's only real person of interest. The theory was simple. A familial dispute escalated to the ultimate, horrific conclusion. Perhaps Connie had confronted them at the truck. Perhaps she had involvement with others who did. But how? An elderly woman orchestrating or carrying out the disappearance and murder of 3 people, including her own granddaughter, on a remote mountain road? The logistics were daunting. Furthermore, she had something of an alibi, though not ironclad. While the bitterness provided a powerful emotional motive, the practical execution of the crime seemed beyond her means. The investigation into Connie eventually stalled, lacking any physical evidence to place her at the scene. She remained a figure of deep suspicion and tragic complexity, a grandmother who lost her family, yet who many believe knew more than she ever said. She died in 2021, taking whatever secrets she held to her own grave. The cliffhanger she leaves behind is one of intimate evil. The greatest dangers, we are told, lurk within our own circles. Was Connie a grieving victim of circumstance, or a Machiavellian figure who managed to commit the perfect, untraceable family crime? The answer died with her, leaving only the chilling resonance of a family torn apart from the inside, long before the mountain claimed them. Rural Oklahoma in the 2000s was, like many parts of America, grappling with the scourge of methamphetamine. Bobby Jamison had a distant past that brushed against this world. Could the Jamisons' disappearance be a drug deal gone catastrophically wrong? The theory posits that the $32,000 was of the land, but for a significant purchase. The meeting on the mountain was a setup. They were intercepted, robbed, and executed. This would explain the untouched cash left in the truck. A red herring, a deliberate misdirection to steer investigators away from the drug trade. It would explain the small caliber pistol, a common tool in such executions, and it would explain why the bodies were hidden. Drug murders are often clean, efficient, and designed to send a message without leaving evidence. But the theory has gaping holes. Bobby was not known to be active in that world at the time. The amount of cash, while significant, was also a plausible land payment. Most damningly, a professional drug hit would almost certainly have taken the money. Leaving it behind makes no economic or logical sense for criminals. Furthermore, the psychological profile of the Jamisons in their final days, the paranoia, the fixation on the supernatural, doesn't align neatly with people calmly conducting a high-stakes illegal transaction. The drug angle is a classic red herring, a convenient societal villain, to pin a complex tragedy upon. It's a theory that offers a clean, cynical narrative. Greed and chemistry lead to death. But the Jamison case is anything but clean. The cliffhanger this failed theory creates is one of investigative pathos. In seeking a simple criminal motive, we often overlook the more terrifying, complex human realities. Sometimes, the truth is not in the underground economy, but in the even more clandestine economy of the crumbling psyche. In the entire eerie tableau, one living being witnessed the event. The family's pit bull mate, found locked in the truck, dehydrated but alive. He was a repository of the truth, and he could not speak. Animal behaviorists have speculated what his condition might indicate. He was not injured, which suggests he wasn't attacked or used to subdue the family. He was locked in the truck, which could mean the family intended to return quickly, or that someone else secured him there. His survival for days suggests the event happened shortly after they parked. But the most haunting question is behavioral. A protective dog like a pit bull would typically react aggressively if its family was being taken against their will. The lack of disturbance in the truck's cab suggests there was no violent struggle right there. Did Mate watch his family walk away willingly? Did he know the person or persons who approached? His silent testimony is perhaps the most frustrating piece of the entire puzzle. He was a witness who saw everything, whose body language in those first moments could have pointed to fear, recognition, or confusion. That data is lost forever. Mate's presence turns the truck into a locked-room mystery within a wilderness mystery. He is a symbol of the case's profound isolation. The only soul who knows the truth is one who cannot convey it in a language we understand. He represents the barrier between the human and the inexplicable. We can reconstruct timelines, analyze bones, and profile psyches, but we cannot ask the one being who was there. The cliffhanger Mate leaves is existential. What truths die with the last silent witness? And in how many other cold cases does the only witness walk on four legs, or have wings, or simply exist in the memory of a tree or stone, forever mute? Sherilyn Jameson did not just leave behind bones. She left behind words. Voluminous journal entries and computer files provide a direct line into her deteriorating mental state. She wrote of spiritual warfare, of a black mass that followed them, of feeling constantly watched. In one particularly chilling entry, she wrote something that would later be read as a grim prophecy. I feel like we're being set up for something terrible. Investigators have pored over these writings, looking for clues, for names, for a smoking gun. What they found was a panorama of fear. The journals are less a map to a perpetrator and more a map to a personal hell. They force a critical question. If Sherilyn believed so completely that they were doomed, did she in some way participate in manifesting that doom? This is not victim blaming. It is profiling a potential death trajectory. In cases of suspected suicide or shared psychosis, the victim's own beliefs become the engine of the tragedy. Her writings also mention conflicts with specific individuals, fueling the familial and local suspect theories. But they are couched in such spiritual and paranoid terms that it becomes difficult to separate metaphorical enemies from literal ones. Was the dark force her mother, a drug dealer, or a demon only she could see? The digital ghost of Sherilyn Jameson is the most intimate evidence in the case, and yet it obfuscates as much as it reveals. It gives voice to the terror, but not its source. The cliffhanger embedded in her prose is the power of belief itself. Can a belief be so potent it becomes a physical fate? Can fear write its own ending in flesh and bone on a lonely mountainside? As you lie in the dark, consider the thoughts in your own head. Now imagine them gaining so much power they begin to dictate your reality and your family's ultimate destiny. The line between a premonition and a self-fulfilling prophecy is terrifyingly thin. When physical evidence is scarce, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit is often called upon to read the crime scene as a text. While not officially profiled by the BAU, the Jameson case has been studied by independent forensic psychologists and profilers. Their conclusions are chillingly unanimous on one point. The truck scene is a massive red flag. The orderly arrangement of valuables, the dog locked inside, the keys in the ignition. This is not a scene of panic or a violent struggle. It is a scene of pause. It suggests the family got out of the truck, perhaps voluntarily, perhaps under some non-violent duress or persuasive ruse, with the intention of returning shortly. The presence of all their money and weapons indicates they did not feel an immediate physical threat when they exited. They felt safe enough to leave their survival tools behind. This profile points away from a random, violent ambush. It points toward a scenario where the threat was not immediately apparent, or where the family was complied with instructions from someone they knew or trusted. The profilers I see as a social interaction gone wrong, not a predatory attack. This reinforces the theories of involvement by someone from their inner circle or meeting with someone they believed was harmless. It also, uncomfortably, supports a possibility of a shared decision to walk away from their lives, though the presence of the dog and the cash makes a pure walkaway unlikely. The behavioral profile paints the last moments as a tragic deception. The family stepped out, believing one reality, and walked into another, far darker one. The cliffhanger from a behavioral perspective is the identity of the social actor who had the credibility, the authority, or the persuasive power to get Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison to leave every ounce of security behind and follow them into those woods. The answer to that question is the face of the killer, if there was one, and that face was almost certainly not a stranger's. The 40 acres the Jamisons were trying to buy is not an incidental detail. It is a central character in this drama. It was rugged, heavily wooded, and remote. To Sherilyn, it was spiritually charged, and dangerously so. She believed it was a place of dark energy. This belief transforms a simple act of driving up to see it into a potential ritual, a confrontation. What if, on that day, they weren't just going to look at property, but confront the haunting she felt? What if they brought the gun for spiritual protection, not physical defense? The land's remoteness also provided the perfect stage for any crime. It is a place where sounds are swallowed, where sight lines are measured in feet, where a person can become disoriented in minutes. The land is an accomplice, offering both a motive in Sherilyn's mind and the perfect means for disappearance and death. Even in the purely practical theory of a murder, the choice of location speaks volumes. It suggests premeditation and familiarity. The killer, if there was one, knew this land or knew the Jamisons would be there, isolated. The land is the one witness that never leaves, never forgets, but also never speaks. It holds a forensic truth in its soil, its drainage patterns, its insect life. But after 4 years, it had also done its work of decomposition and concealment. The cliffhanger the land presents is environmental. In our modern age, we forget that geography is fate. A different piece of land, a different meeting spot. And this story never happens. The specific coordinates of that mountain slope are as much a cause of death as any bullet or blade. It asks us to consider how the places we choose, the spaces we inhabit, silently script the boundaries of our lives and our deaths. By 2018, the Jamison case was a decade old and frozen, but the world of cold case investigation was undergoing a revolution. Genetic genealogy, the technique which uses publicly available DNA databases to find relatives of an unknown suspect, has solved hundreds of previously intractable cases since 2018, including the Golden State Killer case. In 2024 alone, over 150 cold cases in the U.S. were cracked using this method. Could it work for the Jamisons? The problem is a prerequisite. You need a clear DNA profile from the crime scene that does not belong to the victims, and therein lies the Jamison curse. The scene was largely sterile. The bodies were skeletonized. No foreign DNA was recovered from the truck or the remains. The .22 pistol, handled by the family, would be a labyrinth of their own DNA, without a biological signature from an outsider. The most powerful investigative tool of the 21st century is useless. This is a modern forensic paradox. We have technology that can find a needle in a continental haystack, but only if the needle exists. The Jamison case may be a black hole where that needle was never dropped. A 2023 review of the case filed by New Agents, a standard procedure, also yielded no new breaks. They applied modern forensic light sources to the truck's interior, hoping for latent fingerprints or biological traces missed a decade prior. They used MVAC wet vacuum collection systems on the clothing fragments found with the bones. Nothing conclusive emerged. The case demonstrates a hard truth. Not every mystery is solvable with better technology. Some mysteries are built on a foundation of absence. The cliffhanger of the cold case review is one of diminishing hope. Each year, the memory of witnesses fades. Evidence degrades. The case moves further from the realm of solution and deeper into the realm of legend. The question becomes, is this a puzzle waiting for the right piece, or is it a void that will simply absorb all light and inquiry forever? The Jamison case is not unique in being unsolved. What makes it a cultural haunting, a story told in the dark, is its perfect storm of resonant elements. It has the vulnerable child. It has the seemingly normal family with hidden fractures. It has the paranormal undertones. It has a wilderness setting, tapping into a primal fear of being lost. And it has that maddening, contradictory crime scene. It is a Rorschach test for our own fears. Are we afraid of madness? The psychosis theory terrifies us. Are we afraid of human evil? The murder theories chill us. Are we afraid of the unknown? The supernatural angle unsettles us. The case provides a canvas for all of them. Furthermore, it lacks the satisfying closure of a named villain. Our brains are wired for narrative completion. The Jamison story is a sentence without a period. It loops endlessly in the mind, generating theories because the absence of an answer is psychologically intolerable. We must fill the void. In doing so, we are not just solving crime. We are defending our own worldview against the chaos of random, meaningless tragedy. The cliffhanger here is about us, the audience. Why are you, right now in the dark, listening to this? It's because this story holds up a dark mirror to our own insecurities about family, sanity, safety, and precariousness of our own lives. It whispers that the steps from a normal day to eternal mystery are fewer than we dare believe. In the vacuum of facts, folklore rushes in. The Sand Bois Mountains are fertile ground for local legends. Stories of Sasquatch, of inbred families, of satanic cults performing sacrifices have swirled around this case from the beginning. These are not presented as serious theories by investigators, but they are powerful parts of the story's ecosystem. They represent a human attempt to explain the inexplicable with mythic, larger-than-life monsters. A Bigfoot attack is, in a twisted way, more comforting than a murder by a neighbor, because it places the evil outside humanity, in the realm of the beast. The cult narrative serves a similar purpose, creating an organized, ideological evil to blame rather than accepting the randomness of psychotic break or mundane familial murder. These legends are the idea of the investigation, expressing the deep, subconscious terror the case provokes. They also serve as a warning. When official sources fail to provide an answer, the human imagination will create one, often far more terrifying and elaborate than the truth could ever be. The cliffhanger of the local legends is their enduring power. Long after the police files are archived, the stories of what really happened in those woods will continue to grow, mutate, and be told around campfires. The Jamisons have become figures in a modern American folktale. Their truth is buried, but their legend is very much alive. The Jameson disappearance occurred at the dawn of the modern true crime media explosion. It was featured on Disappeared, analyzed on web-sleuth forums, and dissected on countless podcasts. This attention is a double-edged sword. It keeps pressure on law enforcement and can generate tips. But it also distorts, simplifies, and sensationalizes. The family's pain becomes content. Their mystery becomes a puzzle for armchair detectives to solve from the comfort of their homes. Sherilyn's journals become public fodder for amateur psychoanalysis. The complex, painful reality of their lives is flattened into archetypes. The crazy wife, the tough husband, the innocent child. The media storm creates its own narrative, one that can obscure the truth as much as reveal it. It also places a terrible burden on the remaining family and investigators, who must navigate a landscape of rumor and conspiracy theory. The cliffhanger of the media age is this. Does the omnipresent spotlight help solve crimes, or does it create a parallel universe of speculation that makes finding the actual mundane truth harder? In the Jameson case, the media has undoubtedly kept the story alive, but has it illuminated the path to justice, or simply cast longer, more confusing shadows? Let's return to the bones, the only unbiased witnesses. A deeper dive into forensic anthropology reveals what the skeletons might be saying, even in their silence. The scattering and separation could be due to animal activity, but the relative positions could also be mapped to theorize final moments. If Madison's bones were genuinely farther away, it could indicate she fled or was moved post-mortem. The lack of trauma is significant, but not conclusive. Death by gunshot to the soft abdomen from a small caliber, like a .22, would leave no mark on bone. Death by poison would leave no mark. Death by suffocation or strangulation would leave no mark. The bones tell us how they did not die, not by massive trauma, but they do not tell us how they did. The soil analysis around the bodies might have revealed chemical traces of decomposition that could indicate the presence of drugs or toxins, but such testing is rarely conclusive after years of environmental leaching. The forensic anthropologist's report is ultimately a document of exclusion. It narrows the field of possibilities, but it does not point a finger. The cliffhanger in the lab is the limitation of science itself. Science can tell us 1,000 ways something did not happen, but it cannot always tell us the one way it did. In the gap between those two statements lies the entire, haunting mystery of the Jameson family. Weaving together the most prominent psychological and behavioral threads, one coherent, terrifying theory emerges. The self-fulfilling prophecy of spiritual warfare. Sherilyn Jameson, under immense stress, possibly using methamphetamine, which can induce intense paranoia and hallucinations, became convinced her family was under demonic siege. She transmitted this fear to Bobby. Their final trip to the mountain was, in their minds, a journey to confront this evil on the haunted land they were buying. They brought a gun as a spiritual totem. At the sight, Sherilyn's psychosis reached a crescendo. Perhaps she believed they were being overtaken, that the only escape was death. Perhaps Bobby, in his shared delusion, agreed. In this scenario, Bobby may have shot Sherilyn and Madison before turning the gun on himself. Or, in a tragic accident born of panic, a shot was fired, leading to a chain of events that ended in all their deaths from exposure or further gunfire. This theory explains the lack of an obvious outsider, the organized truck. They intended to return after dealing with the spiritual threat, the presence of their own gun, and a lack of defensive wounds. They were compliant with their own shared delusion. It is a theory that ends not with a villain, but with a tragedy of the mind. It is perhaps the most psychologically devastating explanation of all. The cliffhanger this theory leaves is not about who, but about how fragile the wall is between our perception and our reality. How thin is the veil that, once pierced by fear and psychosis, can lead a family to walk hand in hand into oblivion. The counter theory is just as dark, but born of malice, not madness. This is a family annihilation scenario, but with an external perpetrator, someone with powerful grudge, perhaps tied to the family feud, perhaps a business associate, perhaps someone from Bobby's past, lure them or ambush them on that mountain road. This person was known to them, someone they would roll down the window for, someone they might even get out of the truck to assist or converse with, using persuasion or the immediate threat of a weapon. This person compelled the family to walk into the woods. The organized truck was a result of the killer's comm control, not the family's intention. Deep in the woods, using the Jamison's own .22 pistol or another weapon, the killer executed them one by one. The small caliber was chosen for silence, or was simply what was at hand. The killer then left, leaving no trace, confident the wilderness would hide the bodies. The untouched cache was either a deliberate misdirection or simply irrelevant to the killer's motive, which was purely personal, revenge, jealousy, or the silencing of a threat. This theory requires a cold, calculating individual with a specific motive and knowledge of the area. It is a theory of human evil in its most intimate, focused form. The cliffhanger here is the identity of that individual. They are likely still out there, living a life, carrying a secret that annihilated a family. They are a reminder that the banality of evil is not just a phrase. It is a person who shops for groceries, watches TV, and remembers the day they walked 3 people into mountains and ended their lives. As of 2025, the case of Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison Jamison remains officially unsolved. The Latimer County Sheriff's Office still listed as an open homicide investigation, but the trail is beyond cold. It is glacial. Every few years, a news article revisits the mystery, but no new evidence emerges. The family members who remain are left in a purgatory of not knowing. Was it murder? Was it madness? Was it a terrible accident-born delusion? Each possibility offers a different kind of pain. The legacy of the Jamisons is a file of folder contradictions, a set of bones that tell no tales, and a truck full of belongings that became a museum exhibit of a life interrupted. The case has entered the canon of American true crime, a staple of the genre, because it embodies its essence, the human need to know, faced with the universe's refusal to tell. So, what do we learn from the echoing silence of the Sans Bois Mountains? We learn that the landscape of human tragedy has contours that forensic science cannot always map. We learn that the line between victim and agent can blur in the fog of psychosis. We learn that evil can wear the face of a family member, a stranger, or the terrifying mass of one's own unraveling mind. The Jamison case is a mirror held up to our deepest insecurities. The fear that our family is not safe, that our mind is not reliable, that the world is not just. It forces us to sit with ambiguity, a state our brains are wired to reject. In a world where we demand answers, this case offers only questions. And in that, it is perhaps the most honest crime story of all. Because not every story has an ending. Some stories just stop. The Jamison story stopped on a mountainside in 2009. But the story of our fascination with it, our need to solve it, to understand it, to project our fears onto it, that story continues. It continues right now, in the dark, with you listening. You are part of the story now. You are a witness to the unresolved. For the detectives who worked the Jamison case, this isn't a story. It's a weight. It's a memory of Madison's small skeleton. It's the frustration of the inconclusive autopsy reports. It's the haunting final photos. These men and women carry the unresolved like a stone in their pocket. They run through scenarios in their minds on the drive home. They wonder about the tip they might have missed, the interview they could have pressed harder on. The unsolved case is a professional and personal failure. Even when logic says they did all they could, this burden is the hidden cost of justice. For every cold case solved by genetic genealogy in 2024, there are 100 that remain frozen, each one a specific gravity pulling on the souls of those who tried to solve them. The Jameson case is one of those anchors. It is a reminder that the search for truth is often a battle against entropy, against time, against the sheer willful silence of the world. The cliffhanger for the investigator is lifelong. The phone never rings with the right answer. The case file never magically sorts itself. The weight never lifts. For the residents of Red Oak and the surrounding area, the Jameson disappearance is not a podcast episode. It's a local fact. It changed the texture of the woods. It made people lock their doors a little sooner, look over their shoulder a little more often. It bred suspicion and rumor that fractured the social fabric. When tragedy is unexplained, it can poison the community's trust. Neighbors looked at each other differently. The friendly wave from a truck took on a new ambiguity. The case became a dark landmark, a place on the map you avoid, a story you tell to newcomers with a hushed voice. The community carries a collective scar, a shared memory of the time the outside world descended with cameras and questions, and left with nothing but a deeper mystery. The cliffhanger for Red Oak is perpetual. The truth is out there, somewhere in their own hills, among their own people, and that knowledge is a quiet, constant unease. For the surviving Jameson and Poston, Sherilyn's maiden name, family members, the ordeal was a hellscape followed by a limbo. Grieving is hard enough with a clear reason. Grieving amid a maelstrom of media speculation, police suspicion, and fantastical theories is a unique torment. They have had to defend their loved ones' memories against accusations of drug use, madness, and worse. They have had to see their private family conflicts aired on national television. And they have had to live with the grotesque reality that the person responsible for their loss, whether that person was an outsider, a relative, or the victims themselves, may never be known or held accountable. Their loss is compounded by the theft of narrative. They cannot even tell the story of how their family died. They can only tell the story of how they vanished, and how the world tried and failed to understand why. The cliffhanger for the family is eternal. They will likely go to their own graves without the answer to the simplest, most brutal question. What happened? The Jameson case exists in a unique space as a digital age artifact. Sherilyn's journals were digitized. The final photos are pixels. The case is dissected in the binary world of forums and social media. It is a mystery born in the analog world of dirt roads and bones, but it lives and breathes in the cloud. This has created a parallel investigation, one conducted by armchair detectives using tools the original investigators didn't have. Instant communication, vast databases, crowdsourced analysis. This has value, but also danger. It can lead to the harassment of innocent people named in forums. It can spread misinformation. It can turn real human tragedy into an addictive game. The Jamisons have become data points in a global conversation about crime, yet their fundamental humanity can be erased in the process. The cliffhanger of the digital age is whether this new layer of collective scrutiny brings us closer to truth, or merely creates a louder, more chaotic echo chamber around the original silence. Strip away all human malice and madness, and you are left with the oldest killer of all, nature itself. Could a sequence of mundane, natural events explain everything? They drive up the mountain. They get out to look at the land, or relieve themselves. Madison wanders off. In a panic to find her, Bobby and Sherilyn rush into the woods, leaving the truck disorganized in their haste. Contrary to the official report of neatness, they become hopelessly lost. Hypothermia, even in mild weather, can set in if they are wet or ill-prepared. Disoriented, they succumb. Animals scatter the remains. The gun was for protection and was dropped. This theory is clean, simple, and tragic. It requires no villain, no psychosis. It only requires bad luck and the indifferent power of the wild. It is in many ways the most terrifying theory of all because it is so random, so devoid of meaning. The cliffhanger of the naturalistic theory is the indifference of the universe. It suggests we are all just one wrong turn, one missed trail marker away from being swallowed by the void. The mountain didn't hate the Jamisons. It simply didn't care. Perhaps the truth is a mosaic, a combination of several theories. Sherilyn was in a state of drug-induced or stress-induced paranoia. Bobby was going along with it, heavily stressed himself. They arranged a meeting on the land, perhaps with a sketchy individual connected to the purchase or to Bobby's past. This person saw their vulnerability. A confrontation occurred. The person, perhaps panicking, used their own gun or took the Jamisons to control them. A shot was fired. Chaos ensued, and the family was killed or fatally wounded. The killer, not a professional, left the cash in his panic and fled. This theory blends the psychological, the personal, and the criminal. It is messy like reality often is. It doesn't provide a neat archetype of a killer or a victim. It suggests a perfect storm of vulnerability, opportunity, and human failing. The cliffhanger of the composite theory is that truth is rarely a single strand. It is a tangled knot, and sometimes the knot is so tight it can never be undone. Amidst the profiling, the forensics, and theories, it is vital to return to the central, devastating image, a 6-year-old girl. Madison Jameson's smile in earlier photos is a gut punch. She represents pure potential, innocent life, caught in a web she could not possibly understand. Her fate is the core of the case's horror. Whatever happened, a child was led to her death. That is the irreducible truth. All the analysis, all the speculation, orbits around this cold, stellar fact. Madison's story is the one that most starkly highlights the failure, whether of mental health care, of family intervention, of community protection, or of justice. She is a symbol of what was lost, not just a life, but a future. Her small skeleton on the hillside is the ultimate indictment of the darkness that visited her family, from within or without. The cliffhanger Madison leaves is the most painful of all. What would she have become? We will never know. Her story is a book closed before the first chapter is finished. This digital afterlife also affects the investigation in tangible ways. Tips that come in via online forums are often soaked in this iconic imagery, colored by the commenter's emotional response to Madison's photo rather than cold fact. The sheer volume of noise generated by online speculation can, investigators admit, sometimes drown out a single credible signal. Yet, it was also the relentless online interest that kept the case in the public eye during the long, cold years between 2009 and 2013. The collective obsession of strangers created a form of distributed consciousness, a hive mind scanning maps, debating terrain, and dissecting timelines. This hive mind didn't find the bodies, the hunters did, but it maintained the psychic energy around the case, a low hum that maybe, just maybe, reached the right person at the right time. Madison's face was the engine of that energy. Her innocence was a fuel. So, we are left with another paradox. The exploitation of her image may be the very thing that one day leads to justice for her. It is a morally ambiguous equation, where the means feel grotesque but the end remains sacred. The little girl who loved to draw and smile has become a permanent data point in the cloud, a subject of analysis, a catalyst for argument. Her humanity is both amplified and diminished by the digital age. And as you lie there, your device perhaps the only light in the room, you are connected to that vast, whispering network where Madison Jameson lives on, not as a memory in a grandmother's heart, but as a question on a million screens. Let us freeze time on November 16th, 2013. Two men are hunting in the Sans Bois Mountains. The air is crisp. The world is brown and gray. The dense undergrowth crackles underfoot. Their minds are tuned to movement of deer, the flash of fur. Then, a shape that doesn't fit. A scatter of off-white against the leaf litter. Not animal. The mind struggles to reorder itself. A bone. Then another. The curve of a human skull. The small, heartbreaking symmetry of a child's jaw. In an instant, the quiet hunt is obliterated. These two men are no longer hunters. They are unwilling witnesses, the discoverers of a nightmare. Their world, and the world of the Jameson case, fractures in that second. Imagine the surge of adrenaline, the cold wash of dread, the fumbling for a cell phone where there is no signal. They must now carry this image, this intimate knowledge of death's arrangement, for the rest of their lives. They walked into the woods for one purpose, and walked out as permanent characters in a true crime story. Their discovery ended one mystery, the location of the bodies, and ignited a dozen more. But we rarely consider the psychological impact on these accidental archaeologists. They're the ones who first saw Madison's final resting place. That site is a psychic tattoo. Investigators would later descend on the scene, but those first few moments belong solely to the hunters. Their eyes were first to map the terrible geometry. Did they see the gun? Did they notice the spatial relationship between the skeletons? Their initial unadulterated observations, before the cognitive overlay of police procedure and theory, were pure data. Yet, that data is filtered through the shock of the moment. Their statements are crucial, but they are also human documents, stained with trauma. They became a bridge between the vanished family and the official world, a conduit for the mountain secret. And then, as quickly as they entered the story, they receded, their names often omitted for privacy, their lives forever marked by a chance decision to turn left instead of right on a path. The cliffhanger they embody is one of random fate. What if they hadn't gone hunting that day? What if they'd chosen a different ridge? The bodies might have lain for another 4 years or 40, or until they were truly just soil. Their discovery was a statistically improbable event in itself, a collision of human presence with a carefully hidden truth. It proves that in cold cases, hope is not a strategy. It is a stochastic accident, a random walk to the woods that sometimes, terrifyingly, stumbles upon the truth. Every cold case is a museum of what-ifs. The Jameson case is a gallery of them. What if a neighbor had checked on them that first night, instead of days later? What if the initial search had extended just 50 yards farther in one specific direction? What if the police had immediately treated the truck not as a point of departure, but as a primary crime scene, and subjected it to a level of forensic scrutiny that, say, 2025 technology would allow? What if someone had intervened in the weeks before, recognizing Sherilyn's psychological spiral as a medical emergency rather than eccentricity? What if the bitter feud with Connie had been mediated? Each of these moments is a branch in a tree of possibility, and on one branch, the family lives. The agony of an unsolved case is tracing these branches back to the trunk, seeing how close disaster was to being averted. The timeline is a cruel teacher. It shows us that catastrophe is not a single event, but a cascade of small failures, missed opportunities, and bad luck that aligns with sinister precision. Consider the forensic timeline. In 2009, DNA analysis was advanced, but genetic genealogy was not yet a tool. Touch DNA collection was less sensitive. By the time the bodies were found in 2013, crucial environmental evidence, scents for dogs, disturbed soil patterns, ephemeral footprints, was gone. The evidence was caught in a technological valley. Too old for methods of the future, too degraded for the methods of the past. The what if here is torturous. What if they vanished just 5 years later? The outcome might be the same, but the investigative toolkit will be profoundly different. The cliffhanger of the timeline is its absolute indifference. Time is a silent accomplice in every cold case. It erodes memory, degrades evidence, and kills witnesses. It is the enemy of truth. As you lie in the dark, time is passing, and somewhere right now, a piece of evidence in some case is crossing the threshold from potentially viable to forever lost. The Jamisons were lost in the mountain, and then their truth was lost to time. The what-ifs are the ghosts of all the other timelines where the story had a different, perhaps knowable, ending. We inhabit the one where it doesn't. Why does this case, among so many, grip us? The answer lies not in the woods of Oklahoma, but in the architecture of our own fears. The Jameson story is a perfect synthesis of ancient and modern dread. It taps into the primal fear of the wilderness, the terra incognita, where civilization's rules dissolve. It engages a domestic fear of the family unit imploding. It flirts with the supernatural fear of unseen forces. And it delivers the modern fear of ambiguity, a mystery that refuses categorization in our data-obsessed age. We are a species that tells stories to make sense of chaos. The Jameson case resists a single, coherent story. It offers us multiple, conflicting narratives, and that cognitive dissonance is deeply unsettling. Our brains itch to resolve it. So we choose a theory, the drugs, the madness, the murder, the cult, and we cling to it, not because the evidence is strong, but because the alternative is to accept a chaotic universe, where a family can simply blink out of existence for no reason at all. This case also holds a mirror to our societal judgments. Notice how quickly the narrative of meth-fueled psychosis took hold. It's a convenient, stigmatized box that allows us to distance ourselves from the tragedy. They were drug users. They were unstable. Therefore, their world is not our world. Their fate could not be ours. The theory of a mundane murder by a neighbor is hard to sit with, because it suggests evil is banal and local. The supernatural theory is the easiest to dismiss outwardly, but perhaps the most thrilling to entertain in the dark. It speaks to a childlike fear of monsters. The Jameson case becomes a Rorschach test for our prejudices and our deepest, most secret fears. The cliffhanger it presents is about self-knowledge. Which theory do you find yourself favoring? And what does that preference reveal about what you truly fear most? The monster within, the monster next door, or the monster in the dark? Where does an unsolved case live? It doesn't reside in a file cabinet. That's just its corpse. Its spirit lives in the liminal spaces, in the conversations of retired detectives over coffee, in the nightmares of family members, in the clickbait headlines that pop up on anniversaries, and in documentaries like this one, whispered into the ears of the sleepless. The Jameson case has a jurisdiction of its own, a territory of the mind and the culture. It is a place where justice is absent, but curiosity is a permanent resident. This unquiet grave is a powerful place. It generates its own gravity, pulling in new generations of sleuths, writers, and listeners. It functions as a cautionary tale, a ghost story, and a forensic puzzle all at once. Its very lack of resolution is its defining feature, making it immortal in a way a solved case can never be. Solved cases have endings. Unsolved cases have myths. This jurisdictional claim extends into the legal world. The Latimer County Sheriff's Office technically owns the case, but its resources are limited. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation has a stake. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit could be consulted, yet without a clear federal angle. The case exists in a bureaucratic hinterland, important to many but the absolute priority of none. It is in a perpetual state of under review, which is often just a polite synonym for waiting for a miracle. The unquiet grave is also a physical place. That slope in the San Juan Mountains is hallowed ground now, though unmarked. If you knew the coordinates, you could stand there. You would feel the wind, see the same trees. But would you feel the truth? Probably not. The truth left only bones, and the bones have been collected. All that remains is a story and a haunting, perpetual question. The cliffhanger of jurisdiction is one of fading responsibility. As years turn to decades, who will care? The case will pass from an active file to a historical curiosity, from a tragedy to a footnote. The unquiet grave will slowly be paved over by the sheer weight of time, unless someone, someday, speaks. Let us return to the most concrete piece of evidence, the .22 caliber pistol found near Sherilyn's remains. It is a physical object, a tool designed for one purpose. In the context of this case, it is a sphinx. If it could speak, it would tell the entire story. The friction ridge patterns on its grip, now degraded by time and elements, once held the fingerprints of the last person to fire it. The minuscule particles in its barrel could have indicated if it was fired recently before their disappearance. Its position relative to the bodies could have been mapped with laser precision to theorize its trajectory from a hand. But the science of 2013, applied to an object exposed to the Oklahoma seasons for over 4 years, yielded nothing definitive. It is the heart of the forensic paradox. The most telling object is mute. Consider the possibilities encoded in that steel. Scenario 1. It was a comfort object carried by a paranoid family into the woods and dropped when they fell from exposure or despair. Scenario 2. It was a murder weapon used by an outsider to execute them, then discarded. Scenario 3. It was the instrument of a murder-suicide pact, dropped from Bobby's hand after the final, terrible act. Scenario 4. It was fired in warning or defense, initiating a chain of panic. Each scenario paints a radically different picture of the final moments. The gun is a literal trigger for the entire mystery, yet it refuses to release its information. It sits in an evidence locker, a dark relic. In 2025, could we learn more? Possibly. Improvements in metallurgical analysis, in detecting residues on corroded metal, or in 3D modeling impact trajectories might offer new hints. But the core truth, the intention behind its use, is locked in the past, in the minds that vanished. The gun is a symbol of the case's central frustration. We have the weapon, but we cannot reconstruct the crime. The cliffhanger of the .22 is the cliffhanger of all physical evidence. It is a truth bomb that failed to detonate, leaving only a shell of potential knowledge. As you imagine that gun lying on the forest floor, ask yourself, what single fact about it would crack this case wide open? The answer is there, molecularly encoded, and we may never have the cipher to read it. So here we are, at the end of our journey into the heart of the Jameson mystery. We have walked the mountain, parsed the theories, stared into the faces in the final photos, and contemplated the small bones of a child. We have seen how a family can become a constellation of questions. And now, the story must be left where we found it, in the realm of the unresolved. But before we go, let's consider the silence that follows a tale like this. It's a different silence than the one we started with. It's not the quiet of the unknown. It's the quiet of the unknowable. This silence is heavy with the weight of all the stories that will never have endings, all the graves that will never have names, all the justice that will never be served. The Jameson family's fate is a single, stark data point in a vast graph of human suffering that remains uninterpreted. This silence asks something of us. It asks for humility in the face of mystery. It asks for compassion for the families suspended in that silence. And it asks for a recalibration of our need for narrative closure. Perhaps the lesson of the Jameson case is not about finding answers, but about learning to live meaningfully in a world where some questions are permanent. The darkness that took them, whether it was a chemical imbalance in the brain, a bullet from a hated acquaintance, or the sheer indifferent chill of the wilderness, is a darkness that exists. It is part of the fabric of reality. Our safety is not an absolute. It is a temporary negotiation with that darkness. You are in the dark now, listening. The story is over, but the echo remains. The echo of Madison's laugh, lost. The echo of Sherilyn's frantic keystrokes. The echo of Bobby's boots on the gravel. They are all gone, and what stands in their place is a monument made of questions. A monument we visit not with flowers, but with theories. A monument that reminds us that the line between a normal life and an eternal enigma is as thin as a shadow, and just as permeable. So sleep if you can. Let the story fade into your dreams. But remember, the world outside your window contains both the ordinary and the inexplicable, often in the same place. The Jamisons walked out an ordinary day and into a legend. Their story is a whisper from the edge of that abyss. A whisper that says, here there be monsters. And sometimes the most terrifying monster of all is the one we can never see, never name, and never truly understand. Good night.